background behind why we're talking about this topic at this time. The work I do at the collaborative really focuses on social connection, and so I'm leading a project. You can see the need to be needed icon in the bottom corner, really focused on how to build social connection and reduce loneliness and isolation. And so the focus today really is going to be on sort of how do we manage this time of year, particularly from the middle of November to about the beginning of January, can be a really challenging time for a lot of people. It can be a very positive time too, and I think that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we focus on both the positives as well as what might be challenges. And whether you are experiencing some of the challenges yourself or if you are working to support people through this time, we really want to focus on this today as a conversation. And looking at the number of folks we have so far, and it may increase in terms of number as we go along, the I do call this a conversation. And so while I've got a number of things to present, some of it might be new information for you, some of it might be things you may already know or have already assumed. But please, Amelia is going to monitor the chat for me. I'll monitor the chat as best I can. But people feel free to raise a hand, open up your mic, and have a comment. But I'll do my best to watch as we're going along, um, if there are questions or comments that people want to bring up. Um, and so with our time right, not quite 2:05, but getting close on towards 2:05. Let me go ahead and get started. And please, as I said, jump in as you wish. Um, So one of the things that we really talked about when we thought about doing this particular webinar today was really this idea of social connections and their fundamental relationship to our well-being. Um, the holidays themselves, and this it's interesting in that this is a time of year where many of the major um, religious traditions have major holidays. And these are oftentimes a time to reconnect with family and friends, but it's also can be unsatisfying when social connections are not as good as we'd wish and can really cause more pain. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about why we have holidays are an important part of social connection and how we can manage and enhance them through thoughtful activity and engagement. And so I've got some ideas about some of the challenges, but also we were going to talk a little bit about the ways that we can think about how we are somewhat more mindful and intentional in the way we manage uh, ourselves through this season. Um, I need to begin by acknowledging that we are funded by the National Institute on Disability Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research through a couple of different grants, and that NIDLR is a center within the Administration for Community Living in the Department of Health and Human Services. And as any of our work, while we are funded by the federal agency, um, you should not assume endorsement by the federal government for the work that we do. We are supported by them, but we act on our own behalf. I also wanted to make sure to send out a thanks to Tabea Newman and Maida Saria, uh, both folks working with me on the Need to Be Needed project and help me out with some of the ideas and approaches that we're going to talk about at the end of this session. So let me begin with a real quick poll. So I'm going to post the link in the chat, and Amelia, can you post to everyone? Because I only am able to post to the to I'm only able to post the to you. I can't seem to post to everyone.
Certainly, if you can send it to me, I'll make sure everybody can see it in the chat.
This is one of the challenges of trying to do something fun. Um, can I not do this? So if you would, um, you can scan the QR code with your phone, or you can go to HTTP colon slash slash. Um, great. And you don't have to register, you don't have to put in your name, you can just bypass all that. But just a quick would you rather? Um, would you rather be a kid during the holidays or be a grandparent during the holidays? Hmm. So I have to admit, one of the things I am a grandparent, um, and it was a Thanksgiving a few years ago. My grandson, one of my grandsons, he's now 10. He might have been 5 at the time. Um, and he was in one of our rooms in the house and he was working on Legos, and it was quiet time, and I have to catch him after quiet time and just asked him how he was doing. And he said, Grandpa, when I grow up and have kids, will you give me this house? And I said, Of course I will, George. And I'm kind of concerned now because George is the kind of kid who doesn't forget that kind of thing. So being a grandparent is fun, but sometimes you get asked some questions. So it looks like, at least in this poll, the overwhelming, not overwhelming, but at least the majority is um, being a kid during the holidays. So there's definitely something magical about this. So I'm going to post a couple more. These are just on the same site. So you should be able to go to the next one. Um, so this one gets to some of the things around uh, the holiday season, as many of the rituals we have involve gift giving, um, and definitely there are some pressure uh, on gift giving and shopping for presents. So we can talk about that a little bit too, because that is one of the things that we see. So got a little more in terms of helping people to wrap as opposed to shopping for them. I have to admit, shopping for presents is not, I would not say that is my favorite thing to do. So again, a little preference for helping other people wrap them than shopping for them. One more that I think is definitely interesting here, and that is the eternal question about, at what point is pumpkin spice okay, and why does it have to be in everything? And I don't want to influence it, but it definitely looks like the I honestly, I have to admit, I don't get pumpkin spice anything except pies. I do like a pumpkin pie, but when I drink coffee, I just would prefer coffee. Um, so um, it looks like apple cider is the way to go. And let me add one more poll, and that is, would you rather run in a turkey trot or do a polar bear pledge? Two things that happen this time of year through the new year. This one's kind of surprising to me. I would have thought it would have been an even breakdown. Cold water and jumping in water in the wintertime. I know a lot of people do it, but definitely. definitely seems to be the popular sort of thing for folks to do. So I guess that speaks to our lack of desire to run. So just some fun things to get folks engaged and started. And so thanks for taking part in this. Um, I appreciate the participation. All right. So So the holiday season really can be something that has a number of benefits. And while we're talking today about some of the challenges, we want to make sure that we think about why the holiday season it seems to be such an issue and such a big time for us, particularly in the United States, and realize that this time of year is different for different places. But part of it is really where we are located and the cultures and the traditions that are part of North American culture. And so the holiday season actually has a number of benefits. One of the first ones really that we can think about is the idea that holidays, literally the word comes from holy day, and was really established in religious uh, traditions as a way for people to stop their work, to take time away from those other things, to be able to give back time and to worship whatever the religious tradition identifies. But increasingly, holidays really are these times off. And one of the advantages is that in this modern day world, we live with a huge number of people working a whole lot of different times. And so one of the advantages of these holidays is that it is a common time off and identify this for most people, recognizing that not all people have this time off. And in fact, it's always one of the most challenging situations I think that at least I experience because invariably particularly on Thanksgiving Day, for example. When I was growing up, there was absolutely nothing open on Thanksgiving Day. You literally could not get pretty much anything on Thanksgiving Day except for healthcare, emergency rooms. But increasingly, we see people working on these holidays. But the advantage of everyone having common time off is it allows people to get together, that everyone is free or freer from the demands of their work, that it provides people an opportunity to make some travel sorts of things. And so public holidays and common days really do provide this coordination of time that allows us to get together with other people. And that may be friends, that may be family, but it provides us this link that otherwise most of the regular workaday world does not provide. The other thing about holidays that may enhance our social connection is the idea of creating and maintaining these shared rituals. A lot of the work that I've done around families also focuses on this idea that families that are more connected to one another have these activities that they engage in together. And while a lot of things may happen over the course of the year or the course of months, that these things that happen on a regular basis really become part of the family shared ritual. And you may have had these when you were growing up as well. I do remember that Thanksgiving was always spent with my maternal grandparents in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. That one of the things about the holiday season is it is an opportunity for us to share rituals. And like I said, the travel on Thanksgiving when I was growing up was oftentimes real arduous. I mean, basically, we got stuck one time in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, in a snowstorm on our way to Massachusetts, um, and it was always part of the family experience. And so it's something that allows us to start to build a connection with other people, and these ideas of doing the same thing with the same people annually really provides a basis for us to connect with one another and have a shared history. Really builds this sense of connection and we-ness. And so that really is some of the benefits really are around these opportunities for social connection. Now, there are also opportunities for things that may not be so good. So, stress can be a part of the holiday season. Now, I don't know if anybody watches a television program called The Bear, um, but if you do and you remember the episode called Fishes, it was probably one of the most stressful episodes to watch of that. Um, that program. And quite frankly, that says a lot about a television program that's supposed to be a comedy. I still have yet to understand how it's a comedy. But anyways, the holiday season really can also be a source of stress for us. And so in addition to providing a time for us to get together and get connected, and develop a sense of history and shared rituals, the holiday season also can be a source of stress. We even have a term that you'll see a lot of places in many of these areas that really focus on helping people to manage their health, and this is called the holiday blues. And people do experience a sense of the blues or some feelings of depressive symptoms and stress. And how do we manage these holiday blues? So one of the things that's interesting, this is a study by NAMI that was a while ago, that really identified that 64% of adults said that they do get affected by the holiday blues, that there's some sort of a down period or a disconnection experience or stress that really gets to them and may negatively affect their experience over the holidays. About a quarter of people actually identify that really has a big effect on them. And so, something to think about as we move into this season, and really one of the reasons that we thought about providing this particular webinar to begin with. So, a more recent study by the American Psychological Association identified that among adults during the holiday season, first of all, very few people identify that their stress goes down during this time. And while most people say that their stress stays about the same, um, a little under half of them, 41%, actually find that they become more stressed during the holiday season. And interestingly enough, is in looking at the reporting on it was a Harris poll that was conducted for the American Psychological Association. They found that at least that 89% of adults identify at least one thing that was a cause of stress during the holiday season. And so some of the things that we would assume to be related to this would include things, including as one of the things that I know that people have identified is this idea of money, spending too much money, or feeling like they don't have enough money to spend to give gifts, to put on meals, to be connected with others. And so one of the things that does definitely drive some of the challenges that people who are um, financially challenged, people who are on fixed incomes, this is definitely a source of stress for a lot of people, whether they have financial resources or not. One of the other things that we definitely see is the issue of missing family or loved ones. Um, the missing family, and sometimes when we're disconnected, um, we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to talk a little more about that in terms of what are some of the generators of why, when we're away from family, or why this may have a negative impact on us beyond just the not being able to be with people. Um, this idea of making the holidays special, that's another area that I think is something we want to really focus on. Um, Making it the best name the day ever um, is probably a real high expectation and puts a great deal of demands on people. Um, the issues around making it just a special day and trying to figure out ways to enjoy oneself, this idea of it having to be perfect can really make a negative impact on people's experience, particularly whomever is the one trying to make it the best day ever for everyone. Not surprisingly, the issues around food and alcohol, um, being apart again from loved ones, and then going back to sort of the examples from the bear, this idea of experience or anticipating family conflict. These are definitely things that can be a challenge, particularly in families that may have a hard time um, with things going on that are changes, that are um, uh, challenges, particularly as children in the family grow up, they may hold different views from their parents. Um, uh, we saw one of the most divisive political elections in some time. That certainly may be something that comes up within families, particularly during family meals. And so this is something that people definitely could experience. The last one really is this idea of feeling left out or excluded. One of the things that we do find is that at this time of year, particularly for people who celebrate religious faiths other than Christianity, Christmas seems to dominate. Yet there are other faith practices that really happen during this same time of the end of the calendar year and get very little attention otherwise. And so this idea of feeling left out or excluded can be not only from social connection, but also from the larger culture that really ignores people's cultural practices. Not surprisingly, stress can also be induced by traveling. And traveling this time of year, if any of you are traveling, is very much stress inducing. As my own childhood experience was that the travel to Thanksgiving was probably the most difficult part of the whole holiday. So, in the area that we work, and that is addressing loneliness and isolation, we also definitely see that the holidays are associated with greater loneliness. Um, the one of the studies that was done just a couple of years ago identified that among adults, more than half really identified some feelings of loneliness during the holidays. And the drivers of these shouldn't be particularly surprising. One of them being the difficulty having difficult family relationships. We typically, again, see lots of models. I mean, if my wife is a big fan of the Hallmark Channel, and the Hallmark Channel, I don't know when they start doing Christmas movies, but every one of them has these quote unquote perfect families. And so when we experience that, this is part of the challenge and can really have an impact on us. This idea of being separated from loved ones at a distance where we may not be able to get together physically creates some challenges for people and adding to loneliness. One of the other things that does add to this is what's known as seasonal depression. And this is also interesting as we move into December. We have the shortest days of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. And so we have very little daytime and daylight, and we have a moderate amount of darkness. And many people really are affected by a lack of light and daylight and may become experience greater depressive symptoms. And so we feel this more challenged experience as it gets darker and we get up in the dark and if we go to work, we go to work potentially in the dark and even come home in the dark. The other things that may contribute to this is feelings of grief about people that we might have lost who aren't with us this coming holiday season that might have been with us in the past and remembering them. The other thing that I'll mention a little bit about social media, but social media is also one of the reasons that people do feel lonely. As you know, one of the things that I frequently comment on is most people don't post on social media the most mundane parts of their life. And so that's one of the challenges we have. Seeing family can increase feeling loneliness, particularly if those relationships are disconnected and have changed. And as I had mentioned, then we see others who are engaged in holiday activities. I actually notice it in commercials now, how everyone, you know, is out for holiday parties and, very much engaged with the people around them and the people they work with. And everyone in the commercials is doing something that looks fascinating and fun. And so when we see other people celebrating, this can be a challenge for us. And so one of the things that is going on, and this is one of the things that is known as social comparison theory. And social comparison theory, a very old social psychological theory that was proposed back in the 1950s. And it really looks at how we compare ourselves to other people. And this is a very natural experience that we make comparisons to the people around us as a way of sort of getting to know our own self and our own attitudes and worth. And while we may feel like this isn't, that we don't compare ourselves to other people, there are a lot of things that are going on implicitly in the way that we orient towards things. Um, these comparisons can create us to comparisons can cause us to be motivated to do things, but they can also undermine us. Um, and the target and the nature of the comparison matters. And let me give you an example of how this works. In one of the early studies of loneliness among adolescents, the study used a technique called experience sampling. And experience sampling is a technique where people have some sort of signaling device and they're signaled at some point over the course of a day, over multiple days. And they basically say what they were doing just before the signal happened. And what they found was adolescents actually identified their greatest levels of loneliness on Friday and Saturday evenings. But potentially, this was greatest because it was also the time when adolescents perceived that other adolescents were out enjoying themselves and they were not. And so they felt particularly lonely at these times when they perceived other people to whom they were comparing themselves to being in an enjoyable situation. And they, on the other hand, are left behind. So there's a funny story that Bono from U2 is credited as saying, and so I used some of that in this model. Bono was once credited as saying, the difference between the Irish and the Americans is that an American walks by some big house and sees somebody who's done really well, and they say, one day I'm gonna be that guy. And he said, but the Irish will walk by that same house and say, one day I'm gonna get that guy. And it really speaks to differences in how we might make these social comparisons. So, social comparisons, we can make comparisons to people who we perceive to be somehow better than us in the sense of there's more success, there's more something that they have, right? Something that we don't have that they have. It may be physical skill, it may be the ability to engage a group of people. And so we may make these comparisons both upward, but we can also make downward comparisons where we compare ourselves to other people who we feel are in some way inferior to us. And I'm not saying inferior in the sense of necessarily pejorative, but inferior in the sense that we may think that we have better outcomes or we have better opportunities or our life is in some way better. Um, Similarly, we can make positive comparisons or we can make negative comparisons. And so, this idea of upward comparison really identifies that when we see upward comparisons and we make positive upward comparisons, they have an impact on us that is different from when we see an upward comparison and we make a negative interpretation about that. Similarly, downward comparisons can make us feel and encourage us to engage in behaviors when we feel that other people may have less than us, and it helps us to feel better about what we have. And we may be more grateful for the things that we have. And additionally, it is possible to make negative downward comparisons, which result in certain outcomes around looking at people who don't have what we have, and essentially looking down on them, as opposed to really using that to make ourselves and our own experiences feel better. So When we think about these two ideas of upward and downward comparisons, we can think about the ways that a downward comparison positive effects can cause us to experience gratitude about our situation. But a downward comparison, when we make a negative interpretation, we may generate a feeling of scorn or disapproval or disgust about someone else's situation. In contrast, upward comparisons oftentimes have positive outcomes when it is a positive effect. And so, one of the things that when we look at an upward comparison where we see someone or something that we aspire to, it actually can instill hope and inspiration and motivation. Um, Quite frankly, some of the ideas behind peer specialist work, certified peer specialists, is around this concept of an upward positive effect. That when a peer is able to use their own recovery journey to talk to another person, another peer, that person may be able to see that they are able to do more than they might have thought they were able to do. It may create a greater sense of hope and inspiration and motivation to engage. And so, really, peer specialist idea that when people have lived experience and are able to do well, it may inspire other people who experience the same challenges but may not be doing as well to think that they can do it, do and experience things as well. Now, when we make an upward comparison that we perceive as negative, this really can create these feelings of dissatisfaction or jealousy towards that target that we perceive to be better than us. But it can also produce loneliness when we feel like everyone else is having a good time and we're not there. That's not us. We're not that person in the car commercial. We're not the young person who's going out with friends for a drink after work. We're just not that person, and it may then cause us to feel less connected. So, how does this work with loneliness? Well, in the work that we do identify a number of things related to loneliness and how loneliness works. And one of the challenges with loneliness is that loneliness was originally thought and continues to be thought to be an adaptive phenomenon, that humans really need social connection. And so when we perceive ourselves, when we experience loneliness, it's thought to be an adaptive reaction to poor social connection. This poor social connection causes us to feel somewhat unsafe socially, but it also chronically will generate this idea around hypervigilance for social threat. That is, when we experience chronic loneliness, we're more likely to look for social threat in the environment. This is known as a cognitive bias. That is, that we approach the world with a particular lens through which we see the world. And that is this negative lens that sees more people sort of reinforcing our loneliness and not treating us well, disregarding us, um, not noticing us. This really results in this idea of a negative upward comparison. And so when we have that bias, we're more likely to see others as being more fun, having better time, having more social connections. That reinforces this idea of negative outcomes from social reactions. And as a result, it generates greater loneliness. And so loneliness can really be a cycle that can be self-reinforcing. And so this is really part of the approach that really we look at when we start to think about how social comparison plays a role in sustaining loneliness. And one of the reasons that we want to talk about it today. So those are some of the contributing factors to loneliness during the season, but psychological does science does really tell us that setting aside time to strengthen our relationships and engage in traditions can benefit our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And so we want to make sure that in addition to understanding what is causing and what are the factors that are contributing to stress and potentially increased loneliness and depressive symptoms during the holidays, what are some of the things that we can do to address these concerns? And so, two of the things that we do talk about, and one of the things that we focus on in some of the work that we're doing, is this area of both gratitude and kindness. And these are resources to help us manage and resist some of the negative outcomes. So, first of all, gratitude. As I was putting this together, it didn't occur to me right away But it did, as I was starting to build this, that gratitude is the name of the holiday coming up next week. It is literally Thanksgiving. And gratitude really is about giving thanks. And it is a positive emotional response that we receive from a benefit, right? And so it's an acknowledgement. We acknowledge the value of other people and things, um, and in many ways above ourselves, right? It's not a it's giving thanks um, without an expectation of something in return. We can express gratitude towards people, which is probably the easiest one that we conceptualize, but it can be impersonal, it can be non-human. We can think about ways in which we can give thanks uh, to a variety of things in our lives that make us better. One of the things that's actually quite interesting is that gratitude, in its multiple cases, that its origin is actually from the word grace in Latin. Um, and it is really a major component of most monotheistic world religions. That the idea of being thankful and being thankful for whatever it is around you, or a particular spirit or tradition, is really part of the resource behind this idea. It really is a part of helping us to reinforce and focus on the positives in life. And some of the approaches that have come out of this really focus on this idea of savoring, that understanding that thinking about and appreciating the good things really is very helpful to us. We know that providing gratitude and giving thanks really does help maintain social relationships. One of the things about it is that it provides us with a positive interaction between individuals. And it can be really very simple to do this, to simply say thank you to people for doing the things they do. It's interesting. I do find that I do some work and have traveled in Eastern Europe quite a bit. And one of the things they do say about Americans is you say thank you so much. You say thank you too much. But for me, I genuinely mean it. I thank people for the work that they do to help me. I thank the people. I take a train to work. I thank the people at the train station getting on and getting off. I always make a point of saying hello to people and thank you. And so it's a way of really establishing, even though they're strangers, a positive social connection. And that through the practice of gratitude, we really have seen interventions that have been used to really help to address issues of disconnection and loneliness, as well as helping to improve symptoms of depression. So, this idea of giving grace and being thankful is one way that we can do that. Another resource is the attitude of kindness. And a lot of times people talk about this as a practice, but others really talk about kindness as an attitude. And these are actions that we do to benefit other people or other things, genuinely to make them happy. The kindness interventions, there is actually a kind of meditation called loving kindness meditation that is really used to help people to focus and engage in positive interactions to help their own well-being. It really has been identified with reductions in loneliness, and it really does start to build these supports for emotionally positive interactions. It builds trust among people. When we do something nice for someone else, it helps them, but it helps us as well. Um, and it supports our sense of relatedness, that when we are good to other people, we're acting in essentially good faith, that the world is a good place and that people deserve kindness, as opposed to acting in bad faith where we think the world is a bad place that is out to harm us. And so there's no need to be kind or grateful for other people. The one thing about kindness that I think is oftentimes overlooked as well is that it should extend to ourselves. And when we think about gratitude and kindness, we oftentimes think about other people, but it is important that we recognize that we extend these things to our own, the way we think about ourselves, because some of us can be quite self-critical, and really treating yourself with some kindness can go a long way. So, what are some things that we can do? Well, there are a couple of approaches that people definitely use. One is this idea of a gratitude jar, and the reason the gratitude jar may work for some people is simply to get a sticky note, and whether it's a daily sort of a thing or every once in a while, if there's something that has gone right for you. What are some of the things that you might be grateful for today? Just simply writing it down helps you to reinforce that sense of gratitude. So, what are the things that are good in your life? What are the things that still cause joy and create a sense of positive experience and positive feelings? So, you might identify these things as things that you are thankful for. So, for example, you may be a member of a family with some disconnection and some real dissonance. But at the same time, there probably is someone within the family that you have connected with, that you might know, that might be somebody that has an experience similar to yours that you can identify with. And so this may be a more distant relative or somebody that you've come to know. So it's an opportunity to really think through what are the things that I'm grateful for and to reflect on them, to keep track of those. Other folks use a kindness jar. And a kindness jar sort of works in the other way. Instead of putting things in a kindness jar, you start with a number of kind acts. And so, for example, one of the resources you might look into is the Mayo Clinic has a program called Kicking Off Kindness, I think is the name of the program. But they begin with 100 small acts of kindness. And that there are 100 different small things that we can do to be kind to one another or to ourselves. And so with a kindness jar, we set it up where we put things in it and take things out of it and make sure that whether it's over the course of a day or a week or some other period of time, we always think about making sure that we engage in these acts of kindness. And so there are very simple things. We can smile to strangers. We can allow someone to go ahead of you in a line. This is very simple sort of politeness in many ways. We can send a actual card to someone. When was the last time you received a written note from someone who just let you know that they were thinking about you and maybe gave you a laugh if it was a funny card? Um, you can offer to help a neighbor. Kindness comes in a lot of varieties. One of the things that I've historically done is that when I shovel snow, I always shovel snow from one neighbor's driveway to the other neighbor's driveway, which includes a good bit of their sidewalks. But it's just a way of letting my neighbors know that I care about them. So this is something that we can do in terms of just being kind to our neighbors. You can also be kind to yourself by just buying yourself some sort of small treat. Doesn't have to be something big. Maybe you've given up donuts, right? Well, one donut in a year isn't going to do that much to you. So think about how you might be able to include acts of kindness that include yourself, and think about being kind to others and yourself during this holiday season. One of the other things that we get challenged for is some other things that we might be able to do. And one of these is like take time for yourself. Um, this goes back to in many ways being kind to yourself. Reflect on the things that bring you joy, but acknowledge the struggles that you're experiencing. That this time of year is a challenge, but there are ways that we can engage in things that are positive. Go out for a walk. This is something that we do know that natural environments are particularly good for people's mental health and well-being. I realize that not everyone has easy access to those, but time in some sort of green environment, or I guess it would be somewhat brown now, but these are really good for our health. Whether it's listening to music or reading a favorite book, engaging in some sort of behaviors that causes joy and pleasure are really valuable things to take time out during this time of the holiday season that can be really quite busy and lots happening, and sometimes just stepping away from that. Um, Remember that we have expectations about things, and what are our realistic expectations? What are things that are important for us, and things that really actually matter to us? Is it the idea that we want to have the perfect sort of a experience or perfect Thanksgiving dinner? And manage your social comparisons. one of the things that we understand is that oftentimes these social comparisons that we make are somewhat implicit. We oftentimes don't really think about them. And so one of the things to do is think about your own um, uh, expectations and your own comparisons. And one of the ways we can do that is through this thing called reframing. Um, and so through reframing, we actually become aware of our own thinking. This is a basic cognitive behavioral therapy technique, sometimes known as ABC. And the A really comes from this idea of an activating situation. So what is the thing that happened that causes a us to generate a belief? That is the B part. And so we notice the thought or the belief that we have, and that it's the thought or belief that really causes the consequence, that's the C part, of how we feel. And so it goes from an event to our beliefs to our consequence feelings, and that it's not the event that creates the feelings, it's the belief. And so then this question becomes, is our thought or is our beliefs based on any cognitive distortions? And some of the things that are cognitive distortions that we see here are this all or nothing thinking. The idea that it is perfect or it's terrible. Um, Another cognitive distortion is this idea of catastrophizing. We have one thing that goes wrong, it's all lost, right? It's everything is going to go bad now, and I have so many problems. We might also jump to conclusions without understanding what somebody or what some event was really intended to mean or what it might mean. We come to a conclusion very rapidly, and particularly if we have a negative mindset or a cognitive bias, that conclusion is oftentimes negative. And then we might also engage in certain activities like labeling or self-labeling, particularly where we feel like I'm bad, I'm stupid, I can't do anything right. And so all of these are cognitive distortions that may affect the way that we interpret, the way we think about, and the impact of some sort of activating event. All right. So some of the things that we can do is that we can look at things slightly differently. So one of the ways we can look at things differently is the situation, for example, I overcooked the turkey. The belief is I can't get anything done. And the distortion is all or nothing thinking, in which the result is this feeling of shame or self-devaluation. An alternative thought process is the food may not be perfect, but the rest of the meal is great and everyone seems to enjoy themselves. And so understanding that we can think differently about things and we don't have to generalize all of this. Another situation might be that an aunt or a family member or some older individual comments on my weight. And so we might, basically believe she thinks I'm lazy and unhealthy, and really result in this idea of self-labeling that makes us anxious about ourselves. But an alternative really is to think through, know, what the comment is. Is the comment really about me, or is it about the person making the comment? And that her comments might reflect her own insecurities and her own concerns. And so again, reframing and thinking are the way that we approach things. The cousin brags about his career. This is an interesting one to me because I learned from my brother and my sister that my mother has this habit of always talking about how wonderful my brother and sister's children are to me. And I always thought, wow, that's why is it, my kids never seem to be getting the limelight. Little did I know that my mother would always tell my brother and my sister how wonderful my children were. And so this idea of people bragging about others' careers, that may create us to actually make this negative upward social comparison. And really this idea that I'll never be as successful, everyone knows I'm no good, making us feel some anxiety and as well as envy for the cousin. But another way of looking at it is simply, good for them. I'm glad that they've done well, and that doesn't really have to have a reflection on me and how I've done. So understanding the ways that we can think through and question and challenge our own beliefs. The last areas that I would encourage that one of the things that we want to do and maintain during this holiday season to manage home for the holidays is a technique called behavioral activation. And behavioral activation is another approach that's oftentimes used in addressing depression and depressive symptoms. And it largely revolves around the idea that sometimes our behavior can change our mood. That even though we may not want to do something, getting out and doing something oftentimes is good for us. And so figuring out a way to make, whether it's a calendar of things I want to do this week that I enjoy, um, we can really identify these things that are specific, achievable, positive activities. And this can be consistent with some of the other recommendations about getting out in nature or doing things like that, that we can really set up a schedule or just a reminder of the things I want to get done this week that are enjoyable and positive, and make me feel better. So behavior activation really relies on this idea of sometimes our mood follows our behavior. And if we do things and we get out and we get engaged socially and physically, we're more likely to experience positive outcomes. Another thing that we focus on quite a lot with our project at the collaborative is around the value and benefit of volunteer behavior. And volunteering doesn't have to be sort of the big, you know, give a bunch of time for working at the food bank, X number of hours, or working at the emergency room, or it doesn't have to be a big formal sort of a thing. Volunteerism is really about giving back to someone or something that we care about. And so when we help a cause or a place or even a neighbor, those are all volunteer types of behaviors. And so volunteerism has really been found to be very beneficial and helps us to make connections around, first of all, it connects us to people who care about the things we care about. So if we're going to volunteer, what are the things we actually care about? Is it food insecurity and helping people who are less off? Is it about nature and supporting the natural environment? Is it about animal welfare? There are a variety of causes that we can be engaged in that by giving back, we are actually demonstrating gratitude. And so volunteerism is really one of the keys that we encourage people to focus in on and really think about the ways that they can give back and feel like they are adding value to the world around them. And then finally, we do encourage, this idea of healthy connections, that not all connections are healthy connections. And so in order to manage our healthy connections, we have to be able to set boundaries in terms of what we're willing to accept and not accept in terms of our relationships. If things are so difficult that it's not possible to discuss them with another person, set a boundary and say, for this meal, politics is off the table. We're not going to talk politics. We're not going to talk religion, whatever it is. If there are topics that are just too controversial, we can set boundaries that we'd really rather not be engaged in that conversation right now. Instead, what are the areas that we can find common ground in? There are definitely things in which we might be able to connect, whether it's around sports teams or around uh, shared television programs, things that we might engage with other people. As we've already identified, gratitude and kindness are key parts of that. And so being gracious and expressing thanks, giving thanks for the things um, that make our lives positive, and then demonstrating kindness and engaging in kindness. And then finally, this idea of seeking to create new holidays and traditions and rituals. We can make a different experience. If historically our holiday season has not been positive. So some of you may be familiar with the thing called Friendsgiving. Thanksgiving is I think one of the most interesting holidays that exist because in the United States it is non-religious. It is a secular holiday. It's one of the few that is expressly around getting together with other people, and that family may be family of blood, but it may be family of creation and family of choice. And so, really, this idea of Friendsgiving is really something I think that is an important idea. So, who you're with on the holiday really can make a lot around the social connections and your health through the holiday season. So we really encourage you to manage your connections. Don't forget to use some of the strategies around um, reframing, around behavioral activation, around um, practicing gratitude and kindness to support yourself through the season. If at any point you'd like to find out more or you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. This is my email here. Or you can find out more of the work that we're doing at the collaborative at tucollaborative.org. And this webinar is being recorded, so you can always find a link to the recording through our website.